Welcome back to the channel for another video on our 22 WRX. Today we're going to be prepping for the dyno. We are going to be jumping on National Speeds Dyno Jet next Friday, so next week's video is going to be this car on the dyno. So before you go on the dyno, the shop, if they've never seen the car before, like National Speed has never worked on this car, they've never seen the car, they do usually charge a pre-dyno inspection. So they want to make sure that the car is ready to go on the dyno. They don't want to have any issues on the dyno. Definitely don't want any fluids leaking on the dyno jet and then leaking down into all the mechanicals. So they definitely don't want any of that to happen. So they do a visual check over of everything. They put the car on the lift. They check all the fluids. They do a bunch of little things, and you do have to pay for that. Now, we're going to do our own pre-dyno inspection today on our vehicle because when we go there, we want to make sure we have zero issues. So I only have 6 things on my pre-dyno inspection list. So let's go over all 6 and check out the car. Let's go. All right, so looking at the front of the car, I got our intake scoop off here just so we can get a better view of everything, but first thing on our list is to check for any obvious leaks. So we definitely want to look down here. So let me get a light so we can shine down. That's better. So we're looking for any obvious leaks. So you can see our belly pan is right here. If we were leaking or anything, we would see some sort of residual fluid. If you're looking at hoses and you see like white stain marks, or like it's usually from, so not like this is just from like, that just rubs off. But if there's like white like dots and like a spray pattern kind of, that's usually coolant leaking from somewhere. We have no coolant leaks anywhere we can see. No oil leaks down here. And when we check underneath the car, we should have no leaks under. So we just took the car out to Cars and Coffee today. So the car just did go through a heat cycle, a couple heat cycles. We drove there and came back, and there's nothing on the ground. We took the car out, there's nothing on the ground, drove it back, so if it was going to leak or if it is leaking, we would see it on the ground. All right, coming back up to the top, we'll just continue checking around for any leaks on the side. Like, so if oil was dripping down, it would come back and probably drip out of that hole, but let's just keep doing our visual inspection, and everything visually looks great. So step 1, we can check that off the list and call that complete. All right, for step 2, now since we know that there's no leaks under the car or on our belly pan, now we want to make sure that all of our fluids are topped off. So we definitely want to check our coolant, our oil. You can check the brake fluid, but I'm sure that is great too. But we're going to check all the fluids and make sure we're good to go. All right, when looking at the coolant, you can see the low and the fill mark here. Kind of just want to be like right in the middle. So we just took the car out. So this is more towards the hot line and the cold line is down there. So coolant is good. No leaks, anything around here. We didn't see any coolant or anything spray. So coolant is good. We'll do a check on the brake fluid. Perfect, right at the line. This is also our clutch reservoir, so we did actually bleed this and add fluid to this at some point. You can see our parent clutch line right there going to our STI slave for our STI transmission. And I got you guys set up for our last check. Going to check our oil. Oil looks great, right at our fill line. Now that we know all of our fluids are good, this is also a good time to change your oil or change any of these fluids if you are due for that service. We have about 500 miles on this oil, so we are good to go. Don't need to change that. Like I said earlier, we did flush the reservoir for the brake master because that is part of the clutch as well. So we did get that flushed at some point. And I mean, the car only has 12,000, just a little bit over 12,000 miles on it. So as long as our coolant is good, we're good to go. It's not at the mileage interval to get this thing swapped out. So moving on past the fluids, the next thing you want to check, depending on what your setup is, you want to check for boost leaks. So with a front mount setup like this, you have greater chance for boost leaks. We have a coupler down there that connects to the turbo. Then we have the one that comes over our frame rail. One connects to the intercooler, and then same thing on the other side. Comes up and around. Each connection is an opportunity for a boost leak. One of the benefits of a top mount setup, you have less connections for a boost leak, especially with this setup. So the top mount usually bolts directly to the throttle body. So as long as you have that gasket and that gasket isn't torn, that rubber O-ring, you're never going to have a leak there. And then there's a quick disconnect coupler right here. As long as that's clipped in, there's going to be no boost leak there. And then that pipe actually bolts to the bottom of your top mount. So those are all like bolt-on connections that as long as that O-ring is good, you're going to have no boost leak. The only connection you really have is the one directly on the turbo, but I mean that also has a clip on it, so there's really no chance for a boost leak with a top mount setup if you have everything hooked up correctly. But we have boost leak checked this car. We did drive it today, and it does make just about 20 psi plus or minus 1, sometimes 21, tapers down to 19, and it just stays around that 20 mark. So after you check for any boost leaks, you now want to check for exhaust leaks. So we did just get the ETS turbo kit installed on this car. It is the G30 900 quick spool turbo kit. So when you just install parts and it goes through a few heat cycles, there is a chance that some of those bolts or some of the work that you did gets a little loose. So it is definitely a good time to get under the car and check everything. And we did that maybe a few hundred miles after we did that install, and we did find 2 of our bolts for our exhaust manifold were a little loose, so we did tighten those back up. And then same thing, our V-band on the turbo to the manifold, that was a little loose as well. We actually just snugged everything back up, and we are good to go now. But you definitely want to make sure you have no leaks, especially pre-turbo, because that's going to affect spool time. It's going to affect a bunch of things, and then anything past there, you don't want to have any leaks. It's going to be just a louder car. So everything is sealed up on this as far as boost leaks, exhaust leaks. There is no oil leaks or anything, so this is a fully sealed engine. We are good to go for the dyno. So once you are done under the hood, the next thing we want to check is our tire pressure. So if you're not sure what tire pressure to run, if you open up your door, on the inside here, it has our tire pressure. So if you don't know what to run, you can always run the manufacturer recommendation, 33 in the front, 32 in the back. And that's for the OEM tire setup with I think it's those Dunlops that are on there. We have a Hankook Ventus V12s on there now. We did swap out those once they got worn out and got these Hankooks. These Hankooks have been fantastic, and I really do love them. This wheel is a 9.5-inch wheel. The stock, I believe, is an 8 or an 8.5 with a 245. So this is still the same stock tire spec, obviously with just the Hankook tire. So I would call this a baby stretch. I don't really call it stretch, but it's definitely not a square setup on the tire. So I actually run 38 psi front and back, just in case there's any type of debeating issue or anything like that, which I doubt we're going to have, since it's not like hella stretch or anything. It's just a baby stretch. But this is a 245 on a 9.5-inch wheel. Now, if your car does have higher mileage on it and maybe it's smoking a little bit, there are other things that you can do for your pre-dyno inspection, because you don't want to go on the dyno and waste their time and waste your own time and money as well. So if your car is having any type of those symptoms, I would definitely recommend doing a compression test. And while you're down there, as long as it passes the compression test, throw in some new spark plugs. We do have brand new spark plugs in this engine that we just put on when we did the turbo kit install. So we know the plugs are good to go. We gapped those a little bit tighter than stock, but we are good to go as far as spark plugs. Compression is great. Car pulls well, doesn't smoke or anything. This car does have 2 cats on it, so I guess if it was like smoking a little bit, we wouldn't see any of that, but the car is running healthy. Everything is good. We're ready for the dyno. I just do want to remind that this is not a dyno tune. This is just a dyno session. So National Speed's not going to be retuning the car. The car is tuned by Mikey. The tune that he gave me and that we made is solid. I mean, the car never shows any knock, and it just pulls and it just works. So we're just going on the dyno just to get some numbers. I don't really like posting all these virtual dyno graphs. Every time I see a virtual dyno graph, it's kind of funny because if you look at the weight of the vehicle, the weight changes on every single dyno graph. And when I was just messing around in a virtual dyno, just changing the weight from like 3,500 to 3,800, which some of those, if you look at the VDs that people are posting, the weights are all over the place. And if you go in the VD software and you type in 3,500 for the weight, plus like the vehicle, like the occupancy weight, from 3,500 to 3,800, it's like a 30 horsepower jump. So like just by fudging just the weight, you can just make more power on the dyno graph. So I just want to jump on a Dyno Jet and just get just official numbers on what it makes on the Jet. And we'll just use this dyno graph as just like a milestone, and we'll just use this as like a baseline for the future mods, which we probably should have jumped on this dyno when the car was much more stock. I did try to get on the dyno like over a year ago, and before the Cobb software was out, just so I could get a baseline, and I couldn't get on their dyno. They were just too busy. So I finally got on the dyno like 2 years later, and like 20 emails later, we're on the dyno just to get some numbers. So if people are asking what I'm hoping to make, I don't really care what it makes, because when we go to the track, we're going to get some times and we'll see what we can actually put down. Every dyno reads different, so the same car is going to make different power on both dynos. So this is just a baseline for us to see what's going on right now. I do expect it to be just a little bit over 400, like I said, around the 410, 420. If you look online, most people that are running this kit, there's not a cap as far as what the turbo kit can make. We're all limited by octane if it's pump gas, and then the next thing we're limited to are the head studs. So most people are around that 430 mark on pump gas. So we're E-tuned, and I mean, we've had a couple revisions. I'm guessing we're around that 420-ish mark. So, but we'll find out next week. Until next time, see you guys.